Tom Spoda, you must resign from this office for refusing and blocking federal law enforcement, for working on the Gilgo Beach serial murder case, for allowing violent criminals to go free, to protect political friends.
The Suffolk County executive there in a war of words with the district attorney. The district attorney had this to say in response.
As for Mr. Ballone, his call for my resignation is not based on anything but a personal vendetta against me for investigating and prosecuting people that he is close to.
Now, they're fighting about a whole bunch of things, but perhaps the biggest mess includes here, obviously, the arrest of the police, the county police chief, James Burke. Also, you've got another problem in another borough, in this case, Brooklyn, where DA Ken Thompson's under fire. He's taken a whole lot of heat for the Peter Leanne case. That's where he recommended no jail time for the former NYPD officer, even though he shot and killed Akai Gurley in that housing project stairwell. We talked about it. An accident, yes, but he was convicted of manslaughter. And again, Thompson was the one who demanded publicly that he be the one to handle the case. All right, let's start off in Suffolk, your old neck of the woods. You were an ADA out there, as I mentioned before. The more that comes out on this, give where the seeds of this really started. And obviously, Jimmy Burke, a prominent figure, but this goes back many years, doesn't it?
Well, first off, many years. I never worked for Tom Spoda. I worked for Jim Catterson. I know who he is, but this isn't the office that I was working at. Jimmy Burke was very close to Tom Spoda. He obviously pled guilty to a very serious crime, and he's going to be sentenced soon. Listen, the fact that you have the #1 police guy pleading guilty to a crime and that he's close to the DA, that kind of taints everything that's going on out there. When you see open warfare like this, where people are going head-to-head calling for each other's resignation, obviously there's a lot of bad blood that's been there for a long time.
And Doug, if you could, for folks who don't remember, there was a notorious case many years ago of which Jimmy Burke was on the scene, or at least one of the officers at the time that was involved. And talk about how many people have always said that there, if not a genesis of this, that's really where a lot of this all began from.
Well, it makes it sound like more nefarious than it is. Tom Spoda was an ADA out in Suffolk County. He tried a murder case out of Smithtown area. It was called the Pius case. And believe it or not, Jimmy Burke, the person you see there, was one of the witnesses in that case. He testified on behalf of the prosecution.
Where a child was killed.
And a child was killed in a very horrible way. And I guess that's where these two first met. So they have a long history together.
Yep.
But I don't think anybody should read anything into that. No. I mean, Tom Spoda was a very good prosecutor, and this is just a problem that's going on.
But Amy,
now.
There's been a reputation that there's been the Wild West out there in Suffolk for a long time, and that it's not just a personal vendetta between the two, but it's who's watching, in effect, the watchers. And this is brought to a head. And this thing could get a whole lot uglier for people who follow this even tangentially than it already has.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pressure on Ballone. Because listen, they're both Democrats, right? So they're undermining their whole party, basically, by going at it with each other. It's embarrassing. But when Ballone wrote this letter asking for Spoda's resignation, it comes on the heels of a Newsday expose, which basically compiled all these sources and all this evidence to allege that there was an investigation into a corrupt defense attorney who was, peddling drugs, and the drugs were ending up in the hands of high schoolers. He was allegedly bribing judges, showing up to court with his drug money, dripping with diamonds and wearing mink coats, and that he was politically connected. That the DA's office set up a wire on him and found all this damning evidence in the course of this wire surveillance that showed his involvement, in all these illegal things, and then nothing happens to him. And the allegation by Newsday was because he had bribed some of the prosecutors in the DA's office, and that came out in the wire. So, people in the DA's office didn't want to get in trouble, so all of a sudden, all this illegal stuff just goes away. This guy is only charged with a little bit of possession of cocaine, and he agrees to give up his law license and then gets it back, and a prosecutor in the office helps him get it back, so basically nothing happened to him. So, once Ballone heard that people were selectively prosecuting and not prosecuting, he said, there's pressure on me to ask this guy to step down.
And again, reference Newsday. I'm not making that one, but that allegation nonetheless came down. It's a mess, Jimmy.
Oh, it's such a mess. And you know something?
And you know, and you can tell people how this, when we get dueling press conferences, more's to come.
And I was just going to say that. This is the tip of the iceberg, because as the Newsday expose points out, there are clearly sources of information, wiretaps and so on and so forth, that are going to be pursued. And it just, I shudder to think of the mess that this could become if any of those claims turn out to be true.
And just think of all the convictions that have come through the offices, that if any of the prosecutors, if the allegations, if there's merit to them, those convictions will be implicated, and there'll be a lot of reopened cases, and all the rest will come down, and more political figures will go down, and all the rest.
You know, Rich, we talk about this from time to time. You know, people don't realize, and putting aside these facts of this case, one of the most important things when people go to the voting booth is when they vote for their DA. Because we talked about it in the last segment, prosecutorial discretion is one of the biggest powers out there, to bring a prosecution or to not bring a prosecution. It's huge. Everybody will second guess a prosecutor, so you need a person with integrity in there. It's really the most important thing.
And don't forget, this on the heels of investigations already going on in Nassau that have to do with that county executive, and wherever on the heels of what happened with the Skelos case, if there's any there, and that also. But a big cloud over Long Island, particularly, as we said, in Suffolk County. All right, let's pivot now to Brooklyn. And Jimmy, I said it at the time, Thompson was sticking his neck out when he said, for people don't remember, after some of the high-profile police-related shootings or deaths that we saw, including in Staten Island, there was, let's create, and they did, a special prosecutor, in effect, authority that was given to the Attorney General in New York, Eric Schneider. So when there was a controversial case, the DA didn't have to have what many people saw was a conflicted situation that we saw out in Staten Island with Donovan and the rest, right? Thompson said, hey, don't look, no, I got this. You guys, I don't need your help in Albany here. I got this. This is my borough, and I will pursue an indictment. He didn't fullest extent of the law. So he pursues it. He gets the indictment. They lead it. They get a conviction for manslaughter. Now, people, good and decent people, will disagree what justice should or shouldn't have been for Officer Liang. No one thinks it was intentional, but nonetheless, Akai Gurley was dead for the crime of walking out of a stairwell in the building that he lived that night. So he gets a conviction, and he then comes back, does Thompson, inexplicably for me, and says, never mind, let's basically give him house arrest or a suspended sentence or whatever else. I don't understand the logic of what was going through his mind at the time, and now there's a lot of pressures on him as a consequence.
It's a very interesting thing with Ken Thompson, because Ken Thompson came into office and actually has been lauded for doing some really good things. You know, the unit that he set up to review wrongful convictions, the convictions that he has overturned, his drug programs. There have been so many programs that actually do address minorities and the way they're treated in Brooklyn, and yet this has caused such an uproar, because here you have a police officer who killed a young fella who the community was promised would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and now this reaction is coming from the individuals that you would think would be aligned with him and on his side. But you know something? You also have to remember that Judge Chun in this case found the manslaughter conviction to not be warranted, and he reduced it to criminally negligent homicide, which is the lowest form of a homicide conviction.
It still could have carried some jail time.
And the problem is that we all know that if it were any of my clients, if it were any non-law enforcement defendant, there would not have been a recommendation for house arrest. And all of these people in Brooklyn, you know, they have friends, they have family, minority family members that get convicted of far lesser offenses, and the DA's office has these strong policies that mandate that they go to jail.
And you know what, Amy? Listen, if he wasn't convicted, this is one of the cases, bad case makes bad law, I get the expression. There's been, I think, far more grievous offenses where cops have walked completely. In this particular one, people could put themselves in his shoes. They paired him with another rookie. It was a dimly lit stairwell, all the rest. He shouldn't have taken his gun out. He certainly didn't, I think, act with any common sense after the shooting. And in fact, first call to a union rep instead of 911 and didn't do mouth. I can go through all the things.
That's
People
what
know.
mandates a jail
But
sentence.
to me,
that's what it is.
what's the DA doing here? It makes no sense.
He's sympathizing. That's what he's doing.
No, he's not. He's
I think he's
covering his
sympathizing. First of all,
backside.
maybe he may be worried for the cop's safety in jail. Okay, that's one thing. But second of all, there needs to be jail time. There needs to be some jail time because he went in there with his hand on the trigger in violation of police protocol. Okay, after he shot the guy by accident, he did not administer CPR or try to save his life as he lay there dying. Someone's
I'm
dead.
making a
He
different
has to
point.
go to jail.
I'm making a different point. Say we get 10 people and 5 say he should have been convicted, 5 said he shouldn't be convicted. I'm not talking about the merits of the case. I'm only saying you got a DA who says, don't look to anyone, this is my baby, fullest extent of the law, I'm going to prosecute it. He gets what he wanted, and then he goes out on point and says, never mind, no jail.
He had a change of
You just made
heart.
a great point. You
Why?
said 5 people think this,
Yeah.
5 people think that. Well, to me, it's just pandering to both sides. For you people on this side, I'm going to prosecute, I'm going to take him to trial, I'm going to get a conviction. And for the other half of you that don't think I should have, I'll tell you what, I'll recommend no
And you
jail
know what?
time.
If he was going to do
And it's
that, and if
backfiring.
he knew that in the beginning, he should have given it to somebody else to try here.
And that's
right
a
or wrong,
perfect reason for
whatever
that.
you were going to do, you should have at least had the convictions that the public should have
That's a
expected. more.
perfect reason for an independent prosecutor.
All right, when we come back here, the Olympic Games, let them begin. The Summer Olympics in Rio just a few months away, but polluted water, Zika virus, among the huge concerns. Now, if athletes get sick, I'm going to ask the panel, do they have legal recourse? We're also going to talk about the massive Russian drug scandal and how the feds here are investigating it.